In the courtroom, Parrot saves employee from false accusation by businessman with just one phrase. Dorothy Mae Johnson was wringing her sweaty hands as she listened to the accusations from the man she had served with total dedication for 15 years. Her employer, the businessman Charles Edward Harrison, was pointing his finger at her with a rage she had never seen before, repeating to the judge that she had stolen priceless jewelry from the mansion in Beverly Hills. The theft charge sounded like a nightmare to the 62-year-old woman who had never taken even a single grain of sugar home during all her years of honest work. Charles Edward presented a detailed list of the items that had supposedly disappeared: a set of emeralds, diamond earrings, a white gold bracelet, and a sapphire ring that had belonged to his late wife's grandmother. The courtroom in the Pasadena district was packed that Thursday morning. Dorothy Mae had no money to hire a private attorney, relying solely on the public defender's office, which seemed overwhelmed with dozens of other cases. Her defender, the young Jennifer Williams, was doing her best, but the evidence presented by the businessman seemed convincing in the eyes of Judge Franklin Thompson. Judge Franklin, as he was known in the region, had a 68-year career and was famous for his strict decisions. His white hair and serious demeanor intimidated anyone who entered his courtroom. He analyzed each document presented by Charles Edward's lawyer with meticulous attention, shaking his head in a way that made Dorothy Mae even more nervous. The businessman, 45 years old, wore an impeccable gray suit and spoke with the confidence of someone used to being heard and obeyed. His import-export company was among the largest in the region, and his influence in the city was well known to all. Dorothy Mae had met him when he was still a young executive who had inherited the business from his father, and she had closely witnessed his transformation over the years. During all those years, she had taken care of not only the cleaning of the mansion, but also the cooking, the laundry, and in recent months Charles Edward's wife Barbara, who had faced a long battle with a degenerative disease. Dorothy Mae remembered fondly the moments when she helped Barbara bathe, combed her graying hair, and accompanied her in long conversations during the quiet afternoons. Barbara Harrison had passed away just 3 months ago, leaving her husband visibly shaken and an immense void in the large house. Dorothy Mae had noticed how Charles Edward had changed after the loss of his wife. He had become more withdrawn, more irritable, and had started questioning expenses he hadn't even noticed before. The employee had even thought that it might be natural, that he needed time to overcome the grief. She had never imagined she would be accused of theft. Charles Edward's daughter, Amanda Harrison, 30 years old, was sitting in the front row of the courtroom, watching everything in silence. She had returned from New York, where she worked as a journalist, specifically to attend the trial. Dorothy Mae had known her when she was just a rebellious teenager who complained about the house rules, and now she saw her as a serious woman, with brown hair tied in an elegant bun and eyes that showed sharp intelligence. Amanda seemed torn between supporting her father and the strangeness she felt about the accusations against the woman who had cared for her mother with such affection in recent months. Dorothy Mae had noticed the questioning looks the young woman gave her father whenever he spoke more vehemently about the alleged theft. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Charles Edward's attorney, Mr. Marcus Anderson, a 50-year-old man known for his aggressiveness in the courtroom, presented the evidence with theatrical flair. He showed photos of the locations where the jewels were kept, pointed to empty drawers and safes, and described how only Dorothy Mae Johnson had unrestricted access to all rooms in the house. Mr. Marcus argued that the housekeeper had taken advantage of the family's vulnerable moment to commit the thefts, likely during the period when Barbara was most debilitated, and Charles Edward spent long hours at the hospital. His words sounded convincing, and Dorothy Mae Johnson felt her heart race every time he looked directly at her. The public defender tried to counter-argue, but faced difficulties. Jennifer Williams was recently graduated and handling her first high-profile case. She questioned the lack of eyewitnesses and absence of physical evidence connecting Dorothy Mae Johnson to the alleged crimes. But her words seemed weak against the prosecution's elaborate presentation. Dorothy Mae Johnson looked at her calloused hands, the result of decades of domestic work, and wondered how her life had come to this point. She thought of her small home in the Queens neighborhood, where she lived alone since her husband died 10 years earlier, and of her daughter who worked as a nurse at a public hospital and couldn't afford to help her with a private attorney. During her youth in a small town in West Virginia, Dorothy Mae Johnson had learned from her mother that honesty was the most precious asset a person could have. This lesson had stayed with her throughout her life, and now she saw her reputation being publicly destroyed by someone she had completely trusted. Tears began streaming down her face when Mr. Marcus mentioned she could face up to 8 years in prison if convicted. The idea of spending her final years in a cell was terrifying for a woman who had always valued her freedom and independence above all else. Then something unexpected happened. One of the high courtroom windows was slightly open due to the excessive heat of that summer day, and a gentle breeze made the curtains move slowly. Suddenly, a green shape flew through the opening and landed directly on the courtroom microphone, causing immediate murmuring in the audience. It was a bright green, medium-sized parrot with a small yellow spot on its head and dark, intelligent eyes that seemed to observe everything around with curiosity. The bird settled on the microphone as if that were its natural place, completely ignoring the commotion its arrival had caused. Judge Franklin banged his gavel several times, trying to restore order. But people in the audience whispered among themselves, pointing at the animal with surprise and amusement. Some court officials approached to try to remove the bird, but it simply flew to another higher spot, landing on the United States flag decorating the wall behind the judge's bench. Dorothy Mae Johnson felt her heart pound when she recognized the animal. It was Charlie, Barbara Harrison's pet parrot. She remembered perfectly how Barbara would talk to the bird during the afternoons, teaching it words and phrases, and how it would stay on its special perch in the mansion's main room, observing everything that happened in the house. Charles Edward visibly paled when he saw the animal. His breathing quickened and he whispered something urgently into his attorney's ear. Mr. Marcus tried to argue that the bird was merely an irrelevant distraction to the case, requesting its immediate removal from the courtroom. But Judge Franklin, who had presided over hundreds of trials throughout his career, had never witnessed anything like it. His legal curiosity was piqued, and he decided to allow the animal to stay, at least temporarily, to see what would happen. Amanda Harrison rose from her chair, clearly agitated upon seeing the bird that had been her mother's constant companion. Her tears began to flow as she remembered how Barbara would spend hours talking to Charlie, especially during the final months when her illness kept her mostly confined at home. The parrot emitted some guttural sounds, then flew again and landed this time on the back of the chair where Dorothy Mae Johnson was seated. The housekeeper slowly extended her hand, and the animal climbed onto her finger as it always did when she fed it at the Harrison home. Jennifer Williams saw an opportunity and stood up to speak. She argued that the animal's appearance was no coincidence, since parrots were known for their ability to memorize conversations and reproduce human speech. If the bird had witnessed something relevant to the case, it might provide important information. Mr. Marcus objected vehemently, saying it was absurd to consider an animal as a witness in a serious trial. But Judge Franklin, always meticulous in his decisions, chose to allow the experiment to continue, at least for a few minutes, to satisfy his own curiosity about the animal's behavior. Dorothy Mae Johnson looked into the parrot's dark eyes and whispered its name. Charlie tilted his head, as he did when Barbara talked to him, and emitted some soft sounds that resembled words. The housekeeper remembered how Barbara always said Charlie was the smartest of all the animals they had ever had. The first sounds the bird made were incomprehensible to most people present, but Dorothy Mae Johnson recognized some fragments. They were pieces of conversations she had with Barbara during the last months, when her employer was weaker and spent most of her time in the living room, where Charlie stayed on his perch. Charles Edward Harrison stood up abruptly, protesting that this was a circus and had nothing to do with the case. His agitation was visible, and sweat began to appear on his forehead despite the courtroom air conditioning. Mr. Marcus tried to support his client, but Judge Franklin ordered everyone to sit down and remain silent. Amanda watched her father's reaction with growing concern. She noticed how he avoided looking directly at the parrot and how his hands trembled slightly. During her career as a journalist, she had learned to read signs of nervousness, and her father's behavior was setting off all her mental alarms. Charlie flew again, this time landing on the central microphone in the courtroom. Judge Franklin adjusted the volume of the sound system, and suddenly the bird's voice became clear to everyone in the room. It began to emit sounds that gradually turned into recognizable words. The first words were a bit muddled, but it soon became clear that the parrot was repeating phrases in English. Dorothy Mae Johnson recognized the intonation Barbara used when talking to the animal, a mix of affection and patience that characterized the gentle personality of the deceased. Judge Franklin called for absolute silence in the room, so everyone could clearly hear what the animal was saying. The murmuring ceased immediately, and even the court staff stopped their activities to pay attention to the unusual phenomenon taking place. Charlie cleaned his feathers with his beak, settled more comfortably on the microphone, and began to speak more clearly. His voice, though obviously that of an animal, carried inflections reminiscent of human speech, specifically the voice of Barbara Harrison, who had spent countless hours teaching words and phrases to her feathered companion. The first recognizable phrases were fragments of everyday conversations. "Good morning, Charlie. It's so hot today. Dorothy, can you bring water?" But gradually, the speech became more specific and relevant to the current situation. The parrot repeated phrases about hiding important things and protecting from Charles. Charles Edward stood up again, this time visibly upset, and shouted that it was a setup, that someone had trained the bird to repeat those specific words. Mr. Marcus tried to calm his client, but the businessman was clearly losing the composure he had maintained all morning. Dorothy Mae Johnson remembered perfectly the conversations the parrot was referring to. They were intimate moments between her and Barbara, when her employer, already very frail, had confided her worries about the family's future and certain behaviors of her husband that made her uneasy. Barbara had mentioned several times that she had noticed strange changes in Charles Edward's behavior. He had become more secretive about his business, received phone calls at unusual hours, and showed growing anxiety about the family's finances. The wife, even while ill, sensed that something wasn't right. Charlie kept talking, and his words became even more specific. He repeated phrases about keeping the jewels in a safe place and not letting Charles take them. The animal's voice carried the same worried tone that Barbara used when discussing these matters with Dorothy Mae Johnson. Amanda Harrison slowly rose from her chair, her face pale with shock upon hearing the words her mother's parrot was repeating. She vaguely remembered overhearing whispered conversations between her mother and Dorothy Mae Johnson during her visits to the house, but she had never paid enough attention to understand what they were talking about. Judge Franklin, despite his decades of experience in the courtroom, was clearly fascinated by the development of events. He took careful notes on his pad, recording every word the parrot uttered. His legal training made him question the legal validity of that testimony, but his human curiosity kept him from interrupting the process. Jennifer Williams seized the opportunity to stand up and request that Dorothy Mae Johnson be allowed to explain the context of the phrases the parrot was repeating. The defender argued that the housekeeper, as the only living person who had witnessed the original conversations, could provide important clarifications about the meaning of those words. Dorothy Mae Johnson took a deep breath and began to tell her version of the facts. With a voice choked with emotion, she explained how Barbara had started to show concerns about the family's financial situation in the last weeks of her life. The employer had even mentioned that she had discovered irregularities in her husband's business. According to Dorothy Mae Johnson, Barbara had found documents indicating significant debts that Charles Edward had hidden from her. The wife had been deeply disturbed to discover that the family's assets were at risk, especially because she worried about the future of her daughter Amanda. It was then that Barbara made a decision that, at the time, seemed like a natural precaution from a concerned wife. She asked Dorothy Mae Johnson to help her hide the family's most valuable jewels in a safe place, out of her husband's reach, until the financial situation was clarified. Charles Edward exploded upon hearing that version of the facts. He shouted that Dorothy Mae Johnson was making up a fantastic story to get out of the theft accusation, and that it was impossible for his wife to have distrusted him enough to hide valuables. His violent reaction only strengthened the suspicions beginning to form in the minds of everyone present. Mr. Marcus tried to control the damage, arguing that even if those conversations had taken place, it didn't prove that Dorothy Mae Johnson hadn't committed the theft later. He suggested the housekeeper could have taken advantage of Barbara's vulnerable situation to get information about where the jewels were hidden. But Charlie hadn't finished speaking. The parrot, which had remained silent during the discussion, began making clear and specific sounds again. This time his words were even more precise and revealing about the events he had witnessed in the Harrison home. The animal repeated long phrases about hidden documents and money that disappeared. He perfectly imitated Barbara's voice, saying phrases like, "Charles mustn't know where it is," and "Dorothy is the only one I trust." Each word came from his beak with surprising clarity, as if he were replaying high-quality recordings. Amanda approached the parrot, tears streaming down her face as she heard her mother's voice being reproduced by the family pet. She extended her hand, and Charlie climbed onto her finger, continuing to speak while she held him close to the microphone. The parrot's revelations continued, including phrases about different bank and secret account. Dorothy Mae Johnson remembered these conversations perfectly. Barbara had discovered that Charles Edward opened bank accounts in her name without her knowledge, using her signature on documents she signed, trusting her husband. The situation in the courtroom was becoming increasingly tense. Charles Edward alternated between fury and despair, while his lawyer tried to find legal arguments to disqualify the animal's testimony. Mr. Marcus argued that parrots simply repeated sounds without understanding meanings, making their statements irrelevant to the case. But Judge Franklin had researched parrots during a quick break on his cell phone and discovered these animals are known for their exceptional ability to memorize not just words, but also contexts and intonations. Some studies indicated that more intelligent parrots could associate words with specific situations. Jennifer Williams presented an innovative argument. She suggested that, even if the parrot's testimony couldn't be formally considered valid, the information it revealed pointed to investigative leads that should be explored. If Barbara really hid jewels, they needed to discover where they were. Dorothy Mae Johnson, encouraged by the parrot's revelations, decided to tell the whole truth about what she knew. With a firm voice despite her nervousness, she revealed that Barbara really did hide the most valuable jewels, and that she, Dorothy Mae Johnson, knew exactly where they were kept. The housekeeper explained that Barbara had installed a small safe behind a painting in her bedroom, a place Charles Edward was completely unaware of. Her employer had trusted only her with the combination, saying the jewels should remain hidden until the family's financial situation stabilized. Charles Edward vehemently denied the existence of any secret safe, but his trembling voice betrayed his growing nervousness. Amanda looked at her father with an expression of disbelief, beginning to seriously question the version of events he had presented. Judge Franklin decided the only way to resolve the matter was through an investigation at the mentioned location. He ordered a break in the trial and determined that a team of experts accompany Dorothy Mae Johnson to the Harrison home to verify the existence of the safe and its contents. The decision caused new uproar in the courtroom. Charles Edward protested violently against the invasion of his property, but Judge Franklin was inflexible. The judge argued that if Dorothy Mae Johnson was lying about the safe, she would be caught red-handed, and her guilt would be definitively proven. If she was telling the truth, her innocence would be established. Charlie remained silent during this discussion, but watched everything with his intelligent eyes. Amanda held the bird carefully, noticing how it seemed to recognize the people present and react to the emotions in the environment. The animal had been her mother's constant companion, witnessing intimate conversations that no human had heard. The court entourage headed to the mansion in Beverly Hills in 2 official cars. Dorothy Mae Johnson traveled with Jennifer Williams and a court officer, while Charles Edward Harrison, Mr. Marcus and Amanda followed in the second vehicle. Judge Franklin chose to personally accompany the search, such was his interest in the case. During the journey, Dorothy Mae Johnson remembered the last conversation she had with Barbara about the safe. Her employer had been very weak that day, but insisted on repeating the combination several times and explaining exactly where to find the secret entrance. Barbara had been very specific about who should have access to that information. The Harrison mansion stood imposingly amid well-kept gardens. Dorothy Mae Johnson felt a mixture of nostalgia and sadness upon seeing again the place where she had worked with dedication for so many years. Every corner of that house brought memories of moments shared with the family, especially with Barbara during her last months. Charles Edward Harrison opened the house with visible reluctance. His hands trembled slightly as he put the key in the lock, and he avoided looking directly at Dorothy Mae Johnson. Amanda watched every movement of her father, noticing signs of nervousness she had never perceived before. The group went up to the master bedroom, a spacious and elegant room that still maintained the subtle perfume Barbara always wore. Dorothy Mae Johnson went directly to the wall, where a seascape painting that the late employer loved was hanging. It was a painting depicting the coast of Martha's Vineyard, where the couple had spent their honeymoon. With precise movements, Dorothy Mae Johnson moved the painting slightly to the side, revealing a small opening in the wall that had gone unnoticed by everyone. Charles Edward Harrison paled upon seeing the hiding place he was completely unaware of, while Amanda watched the revelation with growing surprise. Behind the painting was a small but sophisticated safe with an electronic lock. Dorothy Mae Johnson entered the combination that Barbara had entrusted to her, Amanda's birth date, followed by the couple's wedding year. The safe emitted a soft sound and opened, revealing its contents to all present. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Inside the safe were all the jewels that Charles Edward Harrison had listed as stolen: the emerald set, the diamond earrings, the white gold bracelet, and the sapphire ring from Barbara's grandmother. Besides the jewels, there was also a handwritten letter on letterhead paper, carefully folded and sealed with red wax. Judge Franklin carefully picked up the letter and opened it in front of everyone. It was a letter in Barbara's own handwriting, dated 2 weeks before her passing. In the letter, she explained in detail her discoveries about the family's financial situation and her reasons for hiding the most valuable jewels. Barbara had written that she had found documents proving that Charles Edward Harrison had accumulated enormous debts through risky investments and loans she was unaware of. Even worse, he had used the family jewels as collateral in dubious financial operations, putting the entire family estate at risk. The letter revealed that Barbara had secretly hired an independent accountant to analyze the family's true financial situation. The professional had discovered that Charles Edward had falsified documents and created bank accounts in his wife's name to hide the real state of their finances. Amanda took the letter from the judge's hands and read the most important passages aloud. Her mother had written that she trusted only Dorothy Mae Johnson to protect the jewels, because the housekeeper had shown absolute honesty and loyalty throughout all her years of service. Barbara knew the family assets would be safe in Dorothy Mae Johnson's hands. The letter also revealed that Barbara had left specific instructions for the jewels to be given to Amanda after her passing, but only when the family's financial situation was clarified and Charles Edward took responsibility for his actions. The deceased wife wanted to protect her daughter's future. Charles Edward emotionally collapsed upon hearing the letter's contents. He sat heavily on the bed he had shared with Barbara and buried his face in his hands. Finally confronted with the reality that his wife had discovered his lies and financial betrayals. Judge Franklin also found other documents in the safe, including copies of bank statements that proved the irregularities mentioned in the letter. Barbara had gathered enough evidence to prove her husband was leading the family to ruin through irresponsible financial decisions. Among the papers was a report from the accountant hired by Barbara, detailing how Charles Edward had used his wife's name and signature on banking documents without her true knowledge. The businessman had created an elaborate scheme to hide his financial losses, placing legal responsibility on his ill wife. Amanda confronted her father directly, demanding explanations about the accusations in her mother's letter. Charles Edward initially tried to deny it, but the documentary evidence was irrefutable. His strategy of accusing Dorothy Mae Johnson of theft had been a desperate attempt to divert attention from his own financial crimes. The businessman finally confessed that he knew about the hidden jewels, but couldn't find them after Barbara's death. His accusation against Dorothy Mae Johnson had been motivated by the hope that a police investigation would reveal where the valuable items were stored, allowing him to recover them to pay off his debts. Judge Franklin faced a complex legal situation. The evidence clearly proved Dorothy Mae Johnson was innocent of the theft accusations, but revealed much more serious crimes committed by Charles Edward against his own family. The judge decided to suspend the housekeeper's trial and ordered the case be forwarded to the Department of Justice for investigation of the financial crimes. Dorothy Mae Johnson cried with relief when officially cleared. Jennifer Williams embraced her, celebrating her first major victory as a public defender. The housekeeper had not only regained her honor, but also fulfilled the trust Barbara had placed in her by protecting the family jewels. Amanda approached Dorothy Mae Johnson and apologized on behalf of the family for the false accusations. The young journalist recognized that the housekeeper had been more loyal to her mother than her own husband had been, and that she deserved not just forgiveness, but also recognition for her honesty and dedication. When the group returned to the courtroom, Charlie was still there, now peacefully perched on the shoulder of a court employee who had grown fond of the animal. The parrot seemed satisfied to have fulfilled its mission of revealing the truth, as if knowing it had honored the memory of its beloved owner, Barbara. Judge Franklin officially concluded Dorothy Mae Johnson's trial with her full acquittal. The judge made a point of recording in the minutes that the housekeeper had demonstrated exemplary character and that the accusations against her were completely unfounded. He also praised the courage of defense attorney Jennifer Williams for trusting the unusual evidence presented by the parrot. Charles Edward Harrison was detained in the courtroom itself to await investigation into the financial crimes revealed by Barbara's letter. Mr. Marcus abandoned the case, acknowledging that there was no possible defense against the documentary evidence found in the secret safe. Amanda decided to stay with Charlie, recognizing that the parrot was the last living connection to her mother and had been crucial in revealing the truth about Barbara's final months of life. The animal seemed comfortable with the young woman, perhaps recognizing in her traits of the woman it had loved so much. Dorothy Mae Johnson returned to her home in Queens with the feeling that justice had been served, not only for her, but also for Barbara's memory. The housekeeper knew her former employer would have been proud to see how Charlie had played a fundamental role in revealing the truth. In the following weeks, the investigations revealed the full extent of Charles Edward's financial crimes. He had not only forged documents and created fraudulent bank accounts, but also embezzled funds from clients of his import company to cover personal losses in high-risk investments. The Harrison family's financial situation was much worse than even Barbara had discovered. Charles Edward owed millions of dollars to banks, investors, and suppliers, and had used virtually all the family assets as collateral for loans he couldn't afford to repay. Amanda found herself facing the difficult task of taking control of the family business and trying to salvage what remained of the estate. As a journalist, she used her investigative skills to fully understand the financial situation and develop a plan to deal with the inherited debts. The young woman discovered that her mother had been more foresighted than she had imagined. Besides hiding the jewelry, Barbara had created a secret savings account in Amanda's name, depositing small amounts regularly over the years. This money, while not enough to solve all the problems, would give her daughter a financial foundation to start over. Dorothy Mae Johnson was contacted by Amanda for a special meeting a few weeks after the trial. The young woman wanted not only to personally thank the housekeeper, but also to make a proposal that had been developing in her mind since she discovered the whole truth about her mother's final months. Amanda offered Dorothy Mae Johnson a position as administrator of a small haven she intended to open on the New York coast, using part of the money from the secret account left by Barbara. The idea was to create a business that honored her mother's memory, offering hospitality and care for elderly people. The proposal deeply touched Dorothy Mae Johnson. After decades working as a housekeeper, the opportunity to manage her own business represented a complete transformation in her life. More importantly, it would be a chance to use her experience in caring for people to help others who needed attention and affection. The haven would be located in Santa Monica, in a small but charming property that Amanda had found through her research. The place had been a summer home of a family that emigrated abroad and was being sold at an affordable price due to the owner's need to quickly liquidate the asset. Dorothy Mae Johnson visited the property accompanied by Amanda and immediately fell in love with the location. The main house had 8 rooms that could be adapted for guests, a spacious kitchen where she could prepare home-cooked meals, and extensive gardens where future residents could enjoy the sea air. The business plan developed by Amanda envisioned that the Haven would primarily serve elderly individuals needing special care or those simply wanting to spend time in a welcoming environment. Dorothy Mae Johnson would be responsible for general administration, while Amanda would handle legal and financial matters. Charlie would also be part of the new venture. The Parrot quickly adapted to life on the coast, and his presence brought joy and amusement to the Haven's first guests. Many elderly guests identified with the animal, who represented companionship and memories of times past. The Haven was named Barbara's Haven in honor of the woman who, even after her departure, continued to positively influence the lives of those she had touched. Dorothy Mae Johnson was moved to see her former employer's name on a hand-painted wooden sign that Amanda had specially commissioned for the entrance. The first months were challenging, but Dorothy Mae Johnson discovered she had a natural talent for management and guest relations. Her experience caring for Barbara during her illness had given her valuable skills for dealing with the special needs of elderly individuals. The Haven quickly gained a reputation in the region for the quality of its service and the family-like atmosphere Dorothy Mae Johnson had created. Guests especially praised the home-cooked meals, the well-kept gardens, and the personalized attention they received from the administrator and her small team. Amanda regularly visited the Haven, always bringing news about the business's development and updates on the legal situation involving her father. Charles Edward Harrison had been convicted of fraud and running a financial scheme, but his sentence was partially commuted due to his cooperation with the investigations. The businessman had agreed to provide detailed information about his fraudulent operations in exchange for a reduced sentence. This cooperation allowed authorities to recover some of the embezzled funds and offer some compensation to the affected creditors. The Harrison family's financial situation gradually stabilized, though it never returned to its former level of wealth. Amanda had chosen to sell the mansion in Beverly Hills and most of the luxury assets to pay off the inherited debts, keeping only the essentials for a comfortable but modest life. The young journalist moved to a smaller apartment in New York and focused her career on reporting about social justice and financial issues affecting American families. Her personal experience gave her a unique perspective on how economic crimes can destroy lives and family relationships. Charlie became a sort of local mascot in Santa Monica. The Parrot had learned new words and phrases during his stay at the Haven, including names of regular guests and affectionate expressions he heard Dorothy Mae Johnson use daily. His presence particularly cheered elderly guests who felt lonely. Dorothy Mae Johnson developed a special program at the Haven called Shared Memories, where guests were encouraged to tell stories from their lives while Charlie listened attentively. Many elderly guests enjoyed trying to teach new words to the bird, creating a therapeutic activity that stimulated both memory and social interaction. The housekeeper discovered that managing the Haven brought her a professional fulfillment she had never experienced before. At 62, she had found a new career that combined her experience in caring for people with the opportunity to be her own boss. Amanda began writing a book about her family's experience, focusing especially on the role Dorothy Mae Johnson had played during the most difficult times. The journalist wanted to tell the story as an example of how honesty and loyalty can triumph even in the most adverse circumstances. The book would also address the importance of domestic caregivers in American society and how these often underestimated people play fundamental roles in the lives of the families they serve. Amanda planned to donate part of the royalties to organizations that advocate for domestic workers' rights. Judge Franklin, the judge who presided over the case, visited the Haven a few months after its opening. He was curious to see how Dorothy Mae Johnson had adapted to her new life and was impressed with the transformation she had managed to achieve in such a short time. The judge confessed that the case had been one of the most unusual in his long career, and that Charlie's participation as a witness had changed his perspective on unconventional methods of seeking the truth. He praised Dorothy Mae Johnson for her strength and dignity throughout the legal process. Jennifer Williams also became a regular visitor to the Haven. The young public defender had gained professional recognition due to the success of the case, and often used Dorothy Mae Johnson's story as an example in her classes on social justice at local universities. The defender developed a genuine friendship with Dorothy Mae Johnson, admiring how the domestic worker had overcome adversity and built a new life. Jennifer occasionally brought other clients to see the Haven, showing how it is possible to rebuild life after traumatic experiences. The Haven, Barbara's Haven, gradually expanded, with Dorothy Mae Johnson hiring 2 local employees to help with cleaning and meal preparation. She made a point of offering fair wages and dignified working conditions, remembering her own experience as a domestic worker. One of the employees hired was Ruby, a 55-year-old woman who had lost her job as a domestic worker after being falsely accused of theft by a family in Long Beach. Dorothy Mae Johnson immediately identified with Ruby's story and welcomed her not only as an employee, but as a sister in struggle. Ruby also brought with her a cat named Whiskers, who quickly became Charlie's companion. The interaction between the parrot and the cat amused the guests, especially when Charlie imitated the feline's meows, creating moments of relaxation that alleviated the melancholy that sometimes affected the older residents. The second employee hired was Joan, a 25-year-old young woman who studied nursing at night and worked at the Haven during the day. Dorothy Mae Johnson became interested in her story when she learned that she was struggling to finish her studies while supporting a young daughter as a single mother. Joan brought important knowledge about basic medical care, perfectly complementing Dorothy Mae Johnson's experience in domestic care. Together, they created an environment in the Haven that combined the comfort of a home with the security of specialized care. The Haven began to receive guests with different profiles. There were elderly people who came to spend recovery periods after surgeries, others who sought companionship and social activities, and some who simply wanted to enjoy the seaside environment in a place that offered personalized care. Among the regular guests was Mr. Anthony, a 75-year-old retiree who had lost his wife and felt very lonely in his large house in New York. He became especially fond of Charlie, spending hours talking with the bird about soccer, his passion since youth. Mrs. Constance, 80 years old, was another beloved guest who visited the Haven regularly. She had been a teacher her entire life and loved telling stories to the other guests. Charlie memorized several of Mrs. Constance's stories and would occasionally repeat parts of them, creating fun and touching moments. The Shared Memories program evolved to also include craft workshops, cooking classes, and music sessions. Dorothy Mae Johnson discovered that many seniors had artistic talents that had been neglected during years focused on work and family responsibilities. Mr. Robert, a 70-year-old former carpenter, began teaching other guests how to work with wood, creating small decorative objects and toys. Charlie was fascinated watching the handiwork and learned to mimic the sound of the tools, adding a comedic soundtrack to the workshops. Mrs. Mary Alice, a former seamstress, organized an embroidery group that met every afternoon on the Haven's porch. The ladies created beautiful decorative pieces that were used in the Haven itself or donated to local charities. The Haven began developing partnerships with local organizations, offering special activities and contributing to the Santa Monica community. Dorothy Mae Johnson organized events where guests could share their professional experiences with local youth, creating a bridge between generations. Amanda visited the Haven during one of these events and was moved to see how the initiative had transformed into something much bigger than a simple business. The Haven had become a community center where knowledge, experience, and affection were freely shared. The journalist decided to dedicate a special chapter in her book to the development of the Haven and the positive impact it was having on the lives of the guests and the local community. Amanda realized that her mother, Barbara, would be proud to see how her trust in Dorothy Mae Johnson had borne such positive fruit. Judge Franklin, during one of his visits, suggested that the Haven's experience could be replicated in other cities, creating a network of similar establishments. The retired judge offered help with legal and regulatory aspects if Dorothy Mae Johnson decided to expand the concept. The idea of expansion intrigued Dorothy Mae Johnson, but she preferred to focus first on consolidating the success of the current Haven. Her priority was ensuring that each guest received individualized attention and quality care. values she considered fundamental to the concept of Barbara's Haven. Jennifer Williams brought a group of law students to visit the Haven as part of an educational program about social justice. The young people were impressed with Dorothy Mae Johnson's story and with the example of how adversity can be transformed into opportunities for personal growth and social contribution. One of the students, Richard, the son of a family of domestic workers, was especially moved upon learning Dorothy Mae Johnson's story. He was studying law specifically to defend the rights of domestic workers and found in the housekeeper's experience additional inspiration for his future career. Charlie grew accustomed to the frequent visits and developed a special repertoire of words and phrases for different occasions. When students arrived, he would repeat phrases about studying hard and being honest, which he had learned by observing the conversations between Dorothy Mae Johnson and Joan about the importance of education. The Haven also began receiving elderly couples looking for a quiet place to spend vacations or celebrate wedding anniversaries. Dorothy Mae Johnson created special packages for these occasions, including romantic dinners on the porch with ocean views and activities personalized to each couple's interests. Mr. Joachim and Mrs. Teresa, married for 50 years, chose the Haven to celebrate their golden anniversary. During their stay, they shared stories of their long marriage with other guests, while Charlie listened attentively. The Parrot memorized several of the couple's anecdotes and occasionally repeated them, causing laughter and emotion. Dorothy Mae Johnson realized she was fulfilling a very special role in the lives of people who, like herself, had faced difficult times and needed a second chance or simply a welcoming environment to enjoy their golden years. The employee developed a life philosophy based on the belief that all people deserve dignity, respect, and care, regardless of their financial situation or social position. This philosophy permeated all the Haven's activities and positively influenced both guests and staff. Ruby, the employee who had gone through a similar experience of false accusation, became a special confidant for guests arriving with stories of injustices or family difficulties. Her ability to listen with empathy and offer words of encouragement made her a beloved mother figure to all. Joan, the young nursing student, brought youthful energy and updated knowledge about healthcare. She organized lectures on preventing common illnesses in the elderly and developed a program of light exercises that guests could practice on the beach or in the Haven's gardens. The Haven's routine included morning walks on the beach, where guests could enjoy the sea air and ocean view. Charlie occasionally accompanied these walks on his portable perch, adding his comments and imitations to the stroll to everyone's amusement. Afternoons were dedicated to creative and social activities. Besides craft and embroidery workshops, Dorothy Mae Johnson organized cooking sessions where guests could prepare traditional dishes from their regions of origin, sharing recipes and family stories. Mrs. Geraldine, a retired cook from West Virginia, taught other guests how to prepare cheese bread and homemade dulce de leche. Her classes became so popular that Dorothy Mae Johnson decided to include them as a regular activity in the Havens program. Mr. Emanuel, a former local fisherman, organized fishing expeditions for interested guests. Even those who had never fished before enjoyed Mr. Emanuel's maritime stories and the chance to try their luck at sea. Evenings at the Haven were reserved for quieter activities, such as shared reading sessions, card games, and conversations on the porch. Charlie actively participated in these moments, occasionally contributing appropriate phrases he had memorized from previous conversations. During one of these evenings, Mrs. Constance suggested that guests write their most important memories in a collective book for the Haven. The idea was enthusiastically embraced, and soon a volume of fascinating stories about American lives over several decades emerged. The book included accounts of the Roosevelt era, the construction of Washington, D.C., the military dictatorship, the redemocratization, and the country's social transformations. Each story represented a unique perspective on important historical events, creating a mosaic of the American experience through the eyes of ordinary people. Amanda became interested in the memory book project and offered help to organize it and possibly publish it. The journalist realized that those stories had significant historical and social value, representing voices rarely heard in official narratives. Charlie became a kind of guardian of these memories, as he often repeated excerpts from the most emotional stories during appropriate moments. The parrot had developed a special ability to associate certain phrases with specific contexts, as if it understood the emotional meaning of words. The Haven began receiving visitors from other cities who had heard about the special environment created by Dorothy Mae Johnson. Researchers in gerontology and social work visited the place to study the community care model that had developed organically. Judge Franklin brought a retired colleague, former prosecutor Henry Whitmore, who was impressed by Dorothy Mae Johnson's personal and professional transformation. The prosecutor remarked that he had rarely seen someone overcome legal adversities in such a positive and constructive way. The Haven's success caught the attention of local authorities, who invited Dorothy Mae Johnson to participate in discussions about public policies for the elderly. The former domestic worker found herself in the unusual position of consultant on issues she had only observed as a worker before. Dorothy Mae Johnson agreed to participate in some meetings, but always emphasized that her expertise came from practical experience, not theoretical studies. She advocated for policies that respected the dignity of the elderly and recognized the value of professional caregivers. During one of these meetings, she met other social entrepreneurs working with vulnerable populations. The meeting resulted in partnerships that benefited both the Haven and other similar initiatives in the region. Dorothy Mae Johnson's network grew to include social workers, occupational therapists, nutritionists, and other professionals who occasionally visited the Haven to offer specialized services to the guests. Dr. Charles Monroe, a retired geriatrician who had moved to Santa Monica, began making regular visits to the Haven to monitor the guests' health. He was impressed by the quality of life the residents enjoyed and the welcoming environment created by the management. Charlie developed a special relationship with Dr. Monroe, who always brought special seeds as treats for the parrot. The doctor commented that the animal's presence had visible therapeutic effects on the guests, reducing signs of depression and stimulating social interactions. The Haven began systematically documenting the benefits its guests experienced during their stays. The results showed significant improvements in indicators of emotional well-being, physical activity, and social engagement. This data sparked interest from local universities, which proposed academic studies on the care model developed at the Haven. Dorothy Mae Johnson agreed to the research, provided that the guests were treated as partners in the study, not as objects of investigation. The first study, conducted by the Catholic University of Long Beach, focused on the impact of intergenerational activities on the mental health of the elderly. The results were published in a specialized journal and gained national recognition. Amanda completed her book 2 years after the Haven opened. The work, titled Charlie's Truth, A Story of Justice, Loyalty and New Beginnings, was well received by critics and became a modest bestseller, especially among readers interested in stories of overcoming adversity. The book's royalties allowed Amanda to create a support fund for domestic workers facing legal problems similar to Dorothy Mae Johnson's. The fund offered free legal assistance and emotional support during difficult processes. Jennifer Williams became the legal coordinator of the fund, using her experience in public defense to help other domestic workers falsely accused or exploited by unscrupulous employers. The work became a personal passion for the young defender. Charles Edward Harrison served his reduced sentence and was released after 18 months in prison. He tried to contact his daughter several times, but Amanda kept her distance, still processing emotionally the betrayals uncovered during the trial. The former businessman eventually got a job as a salesperson in an appliance store, a position very different from his previous life as a business owner. The experience deeply humiliated him, but also taught him important lessons about honesty and responsibility. Amanda occasionally received news about her father through mutual acquaintances, but chose to maintain her decision to keep her distance until he demonstrated genuine changes in his character and behavior. Dorothy Mae Johnson, when asked about Charles Edward, always replied that she had forgiven the former employer, but that forgiveness did not mean forgetting the lessons learned during that difficult experience. She used her story as an example to others about the importance of maintaining dignity even when falsely accused. The Haven, Barbara's Haven, celebrated its second anniversary with a special party that brought together current and former guests, staff, partners, and supporters of the initiative. The celebration included artistic performances by the guests themselves and an emotional speech by Dorothy Mae Johnson. During her speech, Dorothy Mae Johnson thanked everyone who had supported her during the difficult times and emphasized how the experience in court had unexpectedly changed her life. She credited Charlie for being the catalyst of the truth that allowed her personal transformation. Charlie, now 4 years since the trial, had become a local celebrity. Tourists often visited the Haven specifically to meet the parrot who saved the maid, and his story had become part of the folklore of Santa Monica. The parrot had developed an impressive repertoire of words and phrases, including greetings in different languages he had learned from international guests. His memorization ability continued to surprise everyone who met him. Ruby decided to study hospitality management through a distance learning course inspired by the success of the Haven and the support of Dorothy Mae Johnson. At 57, she discovered it was never too late to learn new skills and expand professional horizons. Joan graduated in nursing and received a job offer at a hospital in New York, but decided to remain at the Haven, where she felt she could make a real difference in people's lives. She developed care protocols that combined modern medical techniques with the humanized approach characteristic of the establishment. The Haven expanded its capacity to 12 rooms after purchasing an adjacent property. The expansion was funded through a combination of business profits, donations from supporters, and a bank loan that Dorothy Mae Johnson secured thanks to the solid reputation she had built. Judge Franklin, now fully retired, became an informal consultant for the Haven, helping with legal matters and offering occasional lectures on seniors' rights. The former judge had found in the Haven a purpose for his retirement years. The story of Dorothy Mae Johnson and Charlie was adapted into a documentary produced by an educational television network. The film won awards at social film festivals and helped spread the message about domestic workers' rights and senior care. The documentary included interviews with all the main people involved in the story, except Charles Edward, who declined to participate. The film showed both the dramatic moments of the trial and the positive transformation that followed, offering a complete narrative of redemption and personal growth. Charlie made his debut as an actor in the documentary, demonstrating his imitation skills and repeating some of the key phrases that had been crucial during the trial. His participation added lightness and humanity to the narrative, showing how animals can have profound impacts on human lives. The Haven began offering specialized programs for different groups, including retreats for professional caregivers who needed rest and recovery, workshops for families dealing with elderly relatives, and educational programs for youth interested in geriatric careers. Mr. Anthony, the regular guest passionate about football, organized a group of elderly fans who gathered to watch important games on the common room television. Charlie learned cheers and occasionally rooted along with the group, creating hilarious moments of camaraderie. Mrs. Constance published a book of stories based on the tales she told at the Haven. The book was illustrated by Mr. Robert, the former carpenter who had discovered a talent for drawing during art workshops. The collaboration between the two guests inspired other similar creative projects. Dorothy Mae Johnson realized she had found not just a new career, but a true vocation. At 65, she felt more professionally fulfilled than at any previous moment in her life, proving that growth opportunities can emerge at any age. The former domestic worker began receiving invitations to speak at conferences about social entrepreneurship, labor rights, and elderly care. Her lectures were always well received because they combined practical experience with authentic life lessons. During one of these conferences in New York, Dorothy Mae Johnson briefly encountered Charles Edward Harrison on the street, by coincidence. The meeting was brief and cordial, with both acknowledging that their lives had taken very different directions since the trial. Charles Edward offered sincere apologies for his past actions and expressed admiration for the success Dorothy Mae Johnson had achieved. The conversation was emotional but brief, as both understood that the past couldn't be changed, only overcome. Dorothy Mae Johnson returned to Santa Monica with a sense of emotional closure. The chance encounter had confirmed that she had made the right choices and that her current life represented genuine growth from difficult experiences. The Haven continued thriving and became a model for similar initiatives in other United States cities. Dorothy Mae Johnson received franchise proposals for the concept, but preferred to maintain focus on the quality and authenticity of the original experience. Amanda began a serious relationship with Richard, the young lawyer she had met during one of the student visits to the Haven. The romance blossomed naturally, based on shared values and mutual respect for the experiences each had faced. The couple began planning to expand the advocacy work for domestic workers' rights, combining Amanda's journalistic experience with Richard's legal background. They envisioned creating a national organization that could offer comprehensive support to this workforce. Charlie, now a mature and wise Parrot, remained the emotional heart of the Haven. His constant presence and affectionate interactions with guests and staff kept alive the memory of Barbara and the values of care and compassion she had cherished. The Parrot had also become a symbol of how truth can emerge from the most unexpected sources and how justice sometimes needs help to prevail over lies and exploitation. Dorothy Mae Johnson often reflected on how her life had changed dramatically since that terrible day in the courtroom. The false accusation that could have destroyed her life ended up opening doors to opportunities she had never imagined possible. The transformation hadn't been easy. There were moments of doubt, financial difficulties during the first months of the Haven, and the constant challenge of learning new business skills. But each obstacle overcome strengthened her confidence and confirmed she was on the right path. The maid who had once been publicly humiliated was now respected as a successful entrepreneur and advocate for domestic workers' rights. Her story inspired others in similar situations not to give up the fight for justice and dignity. Ruby became assistant manager of the Haven and began developing her own project, a training program for young women interested in professional domestic work. The program emphasized not only technical skills, but also knowledge about labor rights and self-respect. Joan decided to specialize in geriatric nursing and began a master's degree in gerontology, maintaining her work at the Haven as a practical laboratory for her studies. Her research focused on the importance of the social environment in the well-being of the elderly. The Haven, Barbara's Haven, became a sought-after destination not only for guests, but also for researchers, students, and professionals interested in alternative models of elderly care. Technical visits were regularly organized to share the practices developed there. Dr. Monroe published medical articles about the benefits observed in the Haven's guests, contributing to scientific literature on healthy aging and community care. His works frequently cited the environment created by Dorothy Mae Johnson as an example of good practices. The Haven's third anniversary was marked by the inauguration of a small amphitheater in the gardens, where guests could hold artistic performances and lectures. The space was funded through donations and raffles organized by the local community, demonstrating the support the initiative had gained. Charlie gained a companion when Amanda brought a parrot named Bella, who had been rescued from mistreatment. The interaction between the two birds added a new dynamic to the Haven's environment, and soon Bella began learning words and phrases by observing Charlie. Bella's arrival brought special joy to the guests, who enjoyed watching the romance that developed between the two parrots. Charlie demonstrated protective behaviors toward his companion and began teaching her some of his most important phrases. Dorothy Mae Johnson realized that Bella represented a new generation of witnesses who would grow up observing life at the Haven. The parrot absorbed daily conversations about care, respect, and dignity, potentially carrying these messages into the future. The guest's memoir was finally published under the title Voices of the Haven, Stories of an American Life. The work gained recognition as an important historical document and was adopted in university courses on oral history and social experience. Mrs. Constance, now 82 years old, became a sort of official chronicler of the Haven, recording important events and maintaining correspondence with former guests who had returned to their cities. Her letters became a communication network connecting people across the country. Mr. Robert expanded his carpentry workshops to include community projects such as benches for public squares and toys for local schools. The Haven's guests took pride in contributing to improvements in the Santa Monica community through their volunteer work. The Haven began receiving international students interested in American models of elderly care. These visitors brought different perspectives on aging and helped expand the horizons of everyone involved in the project. Dorothy Mae Johnson learned some words in English and Spanish to better communicate with international visitors. Charlie also picked up some foreign expressions, creating amusing moments when he mixed languages in his speech. The international success of the initiative resulted in an invitation for Dorothy Mae Johnson to participate in a conference on social innovation in Canada. The trip represented her first international experience and confirmed that her ideas had relevance beyond the borders of the United States. During the conference in Toronto, Dorothy Mae Johnson presented the story of the Haven and the fundamental role Charlie had played not only in the trial, but also in creating the therapeutic environment of Barbara's Haven. Her presentation was one of the most applauded at the event. The international experience opened new perspectives for Dorothy Mae Johnson on possibilities for exchange and collaboration with similar initiatives in other countries. She returned to the United States with renewed ideas and doubled energy to continue developing her work. Amanda and Richard married in a simple ceremony held in the gardens of the Haven, with Charlie and Bella serving as symbolic attendants. The celebration brought together all the important people in the transformation journey that had begun years earlier in the courtroom. The wedding also represented a symbolic reconciliation between past and present. Amanda had found personal happiness while honoring her mother's memory through continued support of Dorothy Mae Johnson's work. Charles Edward Harrison was not invited to the wedding, but Amanda left a letter for him at the courthouse, explaining her decision and leaving the door open for future reconciliation if he showed genuine changes in his life. The Haven celebrated its 5th anniversary as one of the most successful elderly care initiatives in the state of New York. Dorothy Mae Johnson had transformed a personal tragedy into a positive force that benefited hundreds of people annually. During the celebration, Judge Franklin gave an emotional speech about how the case had changed his perspective on justice and the importance of being open to unconventional evidence. The former judge credited the experience for making him a wiser and more compassionate person. Jennifer Williams, now an experienced and respected public defender, had used her experience with Dorothy Mae Johnson as a basis for developing innovative defense methods for vulnerable populations. Her work gained national recognition and inspired reforms in the public defense system. Charlie, at 9 years old, remained healthy and active, continuing to be the emotional heart of the Haven. His memorization ability hadn't diminished, and he kept learning new words and phrases from the constantly arriving guests. The Parrot had become a kind of living archive of the Haven's stories, capable of repeating excerpts from hundreds of different conversations. Researchers began studying Charlie as an example of animals' ability to preserve human memories. Bella, Charlie's companion, had developed her own imitation skills and specialized in reproducing songs that guests sang during recreational activities. Together, the two birds created a constant soundtrack of joy and memories. Dorothy Mae Johnson's story was included in textbooks as an example of overcoming adversity and female empowerment. Her journey especially inspired women working in domestic services, showing that it was possible to dream beyond the limitations imposed by circumstances. Ruby completed her hotel administration course and began developing plans to open her own haven in a small town in upstate New York. Dorothy Mae Johnson fully supported her, seeing the expansion of the concept as a way to broaden the positive impact of their ideas. Joan defended her master's thesis on the Haven's care model and received offers for doctoral programs at prestigious universities. She chose to continue her studies while maintaining a practical connection to the work at the Haven. The Haven, Barbara's Haven, had become much more than a successful business. It was now a symbol of how determined individuals can create positive changes in their communities, even when starting from seemingly impossible situations. Dorothy Mae Johnson frequently received letters from people across the country who had been inspired by her story. Some were domestic workers who found the courage to stand up for their rights. Others were social entrepreneurs who started similar projects in their regions. The impact of the story extended beyond the United States. The documentary about the experience had been translated into several languages and was used in international university programs on social justice and community development. Charlie and Bella had become parents to two chicks, Hope and Justice, names chosen by the Haven's guests through a vote. The young parrots represented a new generation that would grow up immersed in the values of care and dignity that characterized Barbara's Haven. The presence of a complete parrot family added a new therapeutic dimension to the Haven. Guests who had lost contact with their families or felt lonely found comfort in observing the affectionate interactions between the birds. Dr. Monroe published a book about the Haven's care model, documenting in scientific detail the benefits he had observed in guests over the years. The book became an important academic reference on healthy aging and community care. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Amanda and Richard expanded their domestic workers advocacy organization to operate nationally, with offices in several American state capitals. The work had helped thousands of people obtain fairer and more dignified working conditions. The organization used Dorothy Mae Johnson's story as a case example in its educational materials, showing how false accusations were a common form of exploitation and how it was possible to resist and overcome through truth and perseverance. Charles Edward Harrison, after years of honest work and simple living, finally managed to rebuild a modest reputation in his new community. He never regained his previous wealth, but found inner peace through dignified work and ethical behavior. The former businessman occasionally sent respectful letters to Amanda, reporting his personal progress and expressing hope for eventual reconciliation. Amanda read the letters, but still didn't feel ready to re-establish a close relationship with her father. The Haven, Barbara's Haven, celebrated a decade of operation with a party that brought together over 500 people, including former guests, partners, supporters, and local dignitaries. The celebration highlighted not only the business success, but mainly the positive social impact of the initiative. During the party, the creation of the Barbara Harrison Institute was announced, a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting similar initiatives and promoting research on aging and community care. Dorothy Mae Johnson would be the honorary president of the new institution. The institute would use resources from donations, government partnerships, and royalties from Amanda's book to support projects across the country. The first initiative would be a training program for people interested in creating similar havens in their communities. Charlie, now an elderly but still active parrot, had become a local legend. Tourists visited Santa Monica specifically to meet the parrot who revealed the truth in court, and his story was told by tour guides as part of the city's folklore. The parrot continued to demonstrate exceptional intelligence, not just repeating phrases, but seeming to choose appropriate words for different situations. Researchers continued studying his cognitive abilities, contributing to scientific knowledge about animal intelligence. Bella and the chicks Hope and Justice had developed their own personalities and skills. Hope showed special talent for music, imitating complex melodies, while Justice demonstrated ease in learning names and greeting people individually. The parrot family had become an attraction in itself, but more importantly, continued serving as natural therapy for the guests. The presence of the animals significantly reduced symptoms of depression and anxiety among the residents of the Haven. Dorothy Mae Johnson, at 70 years old, remained energetic and passionate about her work. She had found a life purpose that completely satisfied her and continued learning and growing personally through daily interactions with guests and staff. The former domestic worker had become a respected figure in the national community of caregivers and social entrepreneurs. Her opinions were sought by public policymakers, and she regularly participated in conferences and seminars on social issues. Ruby had opened her own haven in Aspen, following the model developed at Barbara's Haven, but adapted for the mountain climate. The success of her initiative demonstrated that the concept could be successfully replicated in different geographical contexts. Joan completed her doctorate and accepted a position as a university professor, but maintained ties with the Haven as a consultant and researcher. Her academic career had been built on the solid foundation of practical experience acquired at Barbara's Haven. The Haven continued innovating in its care practices. New programs included animal-assisted therapy, technology workshops for seniors, and partnerships with local schools for intergenerational activities that benefited both children and guests. Judge Franklin, now 80 years old, remained mentally sharp and continued visiting the Haven regularly. The former judge often commented that witnessing Dorothy Mae Johnson's transformation had been one of the most rewarding experiences of his long career in the judicial system. Dorothy Mae Johnson's case had influenced changes in United States labor legislation, specifically related to protecting domestic employees against false accusations. New legal procedures required more rigorous evidence before accusations could be formalized. Jennifer Williams had been promoted to regional supervisor of the Public Defender's Office and used her position to implement training on domestic workers' rights throughout the state's public defense system. The story of Charlie and Dorothy Mae Johnson was adapted into a musical that premiered in New York with great public and critical success. The production highlighted themes of justice, loyalty, and overcoming adversity, using music to convey deep emotional messages. The musical included a sophisticated mechanical parrot that portrayed Charlie, performing flights over the audience and speaking key phrases from the real story. The production became a cultural phenomenon and toured several cities across the United States. Amanda and Richard had their first child, a boy they named Gabriel, in honor of the value of truthful communication that had been central to Dorothy Mae Johnson's story. The baby brought a new dimension of joy to the entire extended family. Dorothy Mae Johnson became Gabriel's adoptive grandmother, continuing her tradition of caring tenderly for the important people in her life. The presence of a child in the family brought renewed energy and a sense of continuity for the values she had cultivated. The Haven, Barbara's Haven, expanded once more, this time including a special wing for couples wishing to grow old together in a community environment. The Love in the Golden Years program became very popular among people who had lost spouses and found new companions. The ongoing success of the Haven attracted investors interested in replicating the model commercially, but Dorothy Mae Johnson resisted offers that could compromise the initiative's core values. She preferred organic growth that maintained the authenticity of the experience. Charlie celebrated his 15th birthday with a special party at the Haven. The parrot had surpassed the average life expectancy for his species, possibly benefiting from the loving and stimulating environment where he lived. During Charlie's birthday celebration, Dorothy Mae Johnson gave a reflective speech about how life could take unexpected turns and how seemingly negative events could transform into opportunities for growth and social contribution. Dorothy Mae Johnson's speech was recorded and went viral on social media, inspiring millions of people around the world facing their own adversities. Her words about perseverance and faith in justice especially touched those in vulnerable situations. The Barbara Harrison Institute had supported the creation of 23 similar havens in different states across the United States, each adapted to local cultural and geographic characteristics. The network of establishments had created a national movement of community care for the elderly. The movement also inspired international initiatives. Delegations from Latin American countries visited the original haven to learn about the American model of elderly care, resulting in adaptations of the concept in several neighboring nations. Dorothy Mae Johnson was decorated by the state government with the Order of Social Merit, recognizing her exceptional contribution to the well-being of the elderly and the defense of domestic workers' rights. The ceremony was held at the Governor's Mansion in New York. During the decoration ceremony, Dorothy Mae Johnson had the opportunity to meet others who had dedicated their lives to social service. The meeting resulted in new partnerships and ideas to further expand the impact of her work. Charlie accompanied Dorothy Mae Johnson to the decoration ceremony, causing a sensation among the dignitaries present. The parrot behaved exemplarily throughout the event, demonstrating the education and intelligence that had made him famous. Charlie's presence at the official ceremony symbolized how nature could contribute to human justice and how animals could be important partners in the pursuit of truth. His participation in the event was widely covered by the national media. The Haven, Barbara's Haven, received international certification as a center of excellence in elderly care, a recognition granted by a global gerontology organization. The certificate scientifically validated the empirically observed benefits over the years. The international certification opened new opportunities for exchange and collaboration with similar institutions on other continents. Dorothy Mae Johnson received invitations to visit projects in Europe, Asia, and North America, sharing experiences and learning new approaches. Amanda published a second book, specifically focused on the development of the Haven and lessons learned about social entrepreneurship. The work became required reading in social administration courses at American universities. Amanda's second book included detailed case studies on different aspects of the Haven's operation, from financial management to therapeutic program development. The work provided a practical guide for people interested in creating similar initiatives. Charles Edward Harrison, after more than a decade of simple living and honest work, finally gathered the courage to visit the Haven and ask Dorothy Mae Johnson for forgiveness in person. The encounter was emotionally intense, but resulted in genuine reconciliation between them. During the reconciliation conversation, Charles Edward fully acknowledged his past mistakes and expressed sincere admiration for what Dorothy Mae Johnson had managed to build. He offered to contribute voluntarily to the Haven's work if she would accept his help. Dorothy Mae Johnson, demonstrating the generosity of spirit that had always characterized her, accepted Charles Edward's offer. She allowed him to contribute volunteer work in the Haven's gardens, an activity that provided him with personal therapy while contributing to something positive. The reconciliation between Dorothy Mae Johnson and Charles Edward Harrison was witnessed by Charlie, who had aged to the point of recognizing important people from his past. The Parrot showed curious but not hostile behavior toward Dorothy Mae's former employer. Amanda gradually reconnected with her father after seeing him working sincerely at the Haven and demonstrating genuine changes in his character. The family reconciliation was slow but authentic, based on consistent actions over time. The Haven celebrated its 15th anniversary with recognition as an intangible cultural heritage of the city of Santa Monica. The honor highlighted not only the business success, but mainly the cultural and social impact of the initiative on the local community. During the 15th anniversary celebration, a bronze statue of Charlie was unveiled in the Haven's gardens. The artwork, created by Mr. Robert with help from a professional sculptor, symbolized the importance of truth and courage in the pursuit of justice. The statue of Charlie became a pilgrimage point for people facing injustices or seeking inspiration to overcome adversity. Visitors left small offerings of seeds and fruits, creating a local tradition of gratitude and hope. Dorothy Mae Johnson, at 75 years old, remained active and lucid, continuing to lead the Haven with surprising energy. She had become a model of healthy and active aging, demonstrating that life purpose was fundamental to well-being in later life. Dorothy Mae Johnson's work had inspired changes in national legislation regarding the rights of the elderly and domestic workers. Her contributions to public policies were recognized by lawmakers as fundamental to significant social improvements. Charlie, despite his advanced age, continued to be a central character in the Haven's life. His health was carefully monitored by specialized veterinarians, and he received special care that allowed him to maintain exceptional quality of life. The Parrot had become the subject of scientific study on longevity and animal cognition. Researchers documented his mental and physical capabilities, contributing to knowledge about healthy aging in both animals and humans. Bella, Hope, and Justice had formed their own families, resulting in a true dynasty of parrots at the Haven. The third generation of birds carried the genes and teachings of Charlie, perpetuating his exceptional lineage. The expanded family of parrots had created a constant symphony of sounds and words that characterized the unique atmosphere of the Haven. Each bird had developed different specialties, from music to greetings, creating diversity within the family continuity. Ruby had become a mentor to other women interested in opening similar havens, using her experience in Aspen to guide new ventures. Her support network had resulted in 10 more establishments throughout upstate New York. Joan had become a tenured professor of gerontology and director of research on community care. Her academic career continued to be grounded in the practical experience of the Haven, maintaining links between theory and practice. The Haven, Barbara's Haven, had become a destination for social tourism, attracting visitors interested in learning about the American model of elderly care. Conscious tourism generated additional income that was invested in expanding social programs. Dr. Monroe, now retired from active medicine, had moved permanently to the Haven as a special resident. His presence guaranteed immediate medical care for all guests and added professional expertise to the permanent team. Dr. Monroe's presence as a resident allowed the Haven to expand its services to include specialized care for people with more complex medical needs. The model had evolved to offer a continuum of care from total independence to intensive assistance. Jennifer Williams had been appointed to a position in the Department of Justice, where she coordinated national protection policies for vulnerable workers. Her experience with the case of Dorothy Mae Johnson continued to influence important decisions about social justice. The Barbara Harrison Institute had expanded to international operations, offering consulting and training to organizations interested in replicating the American model of community care. The international work validated the university of the principles developed at the Haven. Judge Franklin, even at 85 years old, continued to visit the Haven regularly. He had become the informal historian of the project, recording in detail the evolution of the initiative from its origins in the courtroom to its current status as an international model. The memories recorded by Judge Franklin became a valuable historical archive on community social development in the United States. His meticulous notes documented not only events, but also the motivations and challenges faced throughout the Haven's growth. The story of Charlie and Dorothy Mae Johnson had been included in school curricula as an example of citizenship, justice, and overcoming adversity. American children learned about the importance of truth and perseverance through the narrative adapted for different age groups. The educational impact of the story extended beyond American borders. International organizations use the narrative as a teaching tool about human rights, social justice, and the empowerment of vulnerable populations. Dorothy Mae Johnson had become a sought-after inspirational speaker internationally. Her lectures combined humor, practical wisdom, and profound messages about human dignity, touching audiences from different cultures and social contexts. During her international lectures, Dorothy Mae Johnson always highlighted the fundamental role that Charlie had played not only in the trial, but throughout her journey of personal transformation. The Parrot represented the truth that emerges when least expected. Barbara's Haven had inspired urban adaptations with the creation of day centers that offered similar services for seniors who preferred to maintain their independent residences. The concept adapted to different needs and preferences. The urban day centers maintained the fundamental philosophy of the original Haven: personalized care, meaningful activities, and an environment of dignity and respect. The expansion demonstrated the versatility of the model developed by Dorothy Mae Johnson. Amanda and Richard had expanded their family with 2 more children, creating a new generation that grew up immersed in the values of social justice and community care. The children frequently visited the Haven, bringing youthful energy that delighted the elderly guests. The family's children developed a special relationship with the Parrots, especially with Hope and Justice, who had grown up alongside them. The interaction between human and avian generations created moments of pure joy that characterized the Haven's unique atmosphere. Gabriel, Amanda, and Richard's eldest son showed an early interest in social work, often helping with the Haven's activities during his visits. His presence represented the continuity of family values to a new generation. Charles Edward Harrison had established himself as the Haven's specialized gardener, finding peace and purpose in caring for the plants and flowers that beautified the environment. His manual work became a form of meditation and personal atonement for past actions. The therapeutic garden developed by Charles Edward became a special highlight of the Haven, offering specific spaces for different activities: meditation, light exercises, socialization, and contemplation. The plants were chosen for their aromatic and therapeutic properties. Charles Edward's transformation from corrupt businessman to dedicated gardener symbolized possibilities for redemption and personal growth. His story demonstrated that people can genuinely change when confronted with the consequences of their actions. Charlie, at 18, had become the undisputed patriarch of the Parrot family. His advanced wisdom was respected by his descendants, who often sought him out for advice, through complex interactions that fascinated observers. The original Parrot continued to demonstrate exceptional cognitive abilities, including recognition of important people from his past and adaptation to environmental changes. Veterinarians considered his longevity and mental vitality as exceptional cases. Barbara's Haven celebrated its 20th anniversary with a 3-day festival that brought together thousands of visitors from across the country. The celebration included cultural performances, lectures on aging, and a fair of handmade products created by the guests. During the 20th anniversary festival, a national awareness campaign about domestic workers' rights was launched, using Dorothy Mae Johnson's story as a symbol of the importance of fighting against injustices. The national campaign resulted in additional legislative changes that strengthened protections for domestic workers, including stricter procedures for investigating criminal allegations and automatic legal support for accused individuals without resources. Dorothy Mae Johnson was invited to participate in the signing ceremony for the new laws at the White House in Washington, D.C. Her presence at the ceremony symbolized the triumph of justice over exploitation and inspired other people in similar situations. Charlie accompanied Dorothy Mae Johnson to Washington, D.C. for the ceremony, causing a national sensation when he appeared in the White House gardens. His presence at an official event of such magnitude demonstrated unique recognition of his historical role in promoting justice. During the visit to Washington, D.C., Charlie met other animals living in the presidential gardens, creating amusing moments that were widely shared on social media. His popularity transcended geographical and social boundaries. The Haven had become a model, studied at international universities as an example of successful social innovation. Academic delegations regularly visited the establishment, contributing to research on aging and community development. Academic studies about the Haven scientifically confirmed empirically observed benefits, significant reduction in depression, increased longevity, improved cognitive function, and strengthened social bonds among participants. Ruby had expanded her network of havens to 5 establishments in upstate New York, each maintaining the fundamental principles of the original model while adapting to local characteristics. Her leadership demonstrated the concept's replicability. The Ruby Haven network developed specializations of their own. One focused on traditional crafts, another on folk music and dance, and a third on regional cuisine. The diversification enriched the offerings without diluting the core values. Joan had published a technical book on applied gerontology that became an international reference. Her work combined scientific rigor with practical insights derived from years of work at the original Haven. Joan's book included detailed protocols for implementing community care programs from initial planning to outcome evaluation. The publication facilitated replication of the model by professionals in different contexts. Dr. Monroe, at 85 years old, remained active as a medical consultant for the Haven and mentor to young geriatricians interested in community medicine. His experience combined decades of clinical practice with unique insights about humanized care. Dr. Monroe's presence at the Haven had created an informal community geriatrics residency program where newly graduated doctors could learn about holistic care through practical experience in a real environment. The Parrot family had grown to 12 members, including the 4th generation descended from Charlie. Each bird maintained unique characteristics while sharing behavioral traits that connected them to the original patriarch. Charlie's descendants had developed specialized skills. Some became music specialists, others in personalized greetings, and some demonstrated exceptional memory capabilities for important events at the Haven. Judge Franklin turned 90 while maintaining exceptional lucidity and continuing his regular visits to the Haven. He had become a living symbol of the importance of maintaining purpose and social connections during aging. Judge Franklin's reflections on his long legal career, including the transformative case of Dorothy Mae Johnson, were compiled in a memoir that offered unique perspectives on the evolution of the American judicial system. Jennifer Williams had been promoted to Attorney General, a position that allowed her to implement structural reforms in the American judicial system based on lessons learned during her career as a public defender. As Attorney General, Jennifer Williams implemented national protection programs for vulnerable workers, using Dorothy Mae Johnson's experience as a paradigmatic case for public policy development. The story of Charlie and Dorothy Mae Johnson was transformed into a highly successful television series, reaching international audiences and spreading messages about social justice and human dignity to millions of people around the world. The television series used renowned actors and high-quality production to tell the story with emotional authenticity, educating audiences about the realities faced by domestic workers and the importance of fair judicial systems. Dorothy Mae Johnson, at 80 years old, remained the active president of the Haven, continuing to inspire staff and guests with her energy, wisdom, and unwavering dedication to the values that had always guided her. Her active longevity and lucid mind were attributed by doctors to her clear life purpose, meaningful social connections, and stimulating environment that she herself had created at the Haven. The Barbara Harrison Institute had expanded to operate in 12 countries, offering training and consulting on American models of community care for the elderly. The international work validated the universality of the principles originally developed. The Institute's international expansion created a global network of establishments similar to the original Haven, each adapted to local cultural characteristics, but maintaining the fundamental philosophy of dignity and personalized care. Amanda had become a special ambassador to the United Nations for aging issues, using her personal and professional experience to promote global policies that protect the rights of the elderly and domestic workers. In her position at the United Nations, Amanda promoted the American model of community care as a viable alternative to traditional institutions for the elderly, demonstrating both the economic and social benefits of the approach. Richard had become a professor of social law at a prestigious university, using Dorothy Mae Johnson's case as a central example in his classes on justice and the protection of vulnerable populations. Richard's courses were sought after by students interested in social advocacy, and many of his students began careers dedicated to defending domestic workers and other marginalized groups. Charles Edward Harrison, at 70 years old, had found complete peace in his new life as a gardener and volunteer at the Haven. His personal transformation demonstrated the possibilities of redemption through honest work and service to others. The therapeutic garden created by Charles Edward had become a model replicated in other elderly care institutions. His adapted gardening techniques for people with physical limitations benefited communities beyond the original Haven. The Barbara's Haven celebrated its 25th anniversary as an institution internationally recognized for excellence in elderly care and social innovation. The celebration brought together dignitaries from various countries and world-renowned researchers. During the 25th anniversary celebration, a research center attached to the Haven was inaugurated, dedicated to studies on healthy aging and the development of new models of community care. Charlie, at 23 years old, had become a scientific phenomenon studied by researchers interested in animal longevity and exceptional cognition. His documented life offered unique insights into brain development and the maintenance of cognitive abilities. The Parrot continued to demonstrate recognition of important people from his past and adaptation to environmental changes, surprising experts with his mental and physical vitality at a very advanced age for his species. Charlie's offspring had spread to other havens in the network, carrying genes and learned behaviors that perpetuated the special characteristics of the original family. The lineage had become a symbol of the continuity of the Haven's values. Dorothy Mae Johnson had been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for her contribution to social justice and community care. The nomination recognized the global impact of her work in improving living conditions for the elderly and vulnerable workers. Although she didn't win the Nobel Prize, The nomination brought additional international recognition for the work developed at the Haven and inspired similar new initiatives in developing countries. Ruby had become president of the National Association of Community Havens, coordinating a network of over 100 establishments across the country. Her leadership ensured the maintenance of quality standards and the fundamental values of the movement. The association, led by Ruby, developed a certification system for community havens, guaranteeing that new establishments maintained their commitment to personalized care and ethical operation. Joan had been appointed as a consultant to the World Health Organization for developing global guidelines on community care for the elderly. Her expertise combined rigorous academic research with extensive practical experience. The guidelines developed by Joan were adopted by governments in more than 50 countries, establishing international standards for elderly care based on principles of dignity and community integration. The transformation story of Dorothy Mae Johnson had inspired a global empowerment movement for domestic workers. International organizations used her experience as an example of how individuals can overcome injustices and create positive social change. The resulting international movement led to significant improvements in working conditions for millions of domestic workers worldwide, demonstrating that individual stories of courage can generate transformative global impacts. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this moving story about Dorothy Mae Johnson and the parrot Charlie. Do you believe justice always finds a way to prevail? Leave your comment sharing your reflections on overcoming adversity and second chances. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories like this one.